Welcome to Founders Unplugged, hosted by Greg McCallum. Long-form, honest conversations with founders and entrepreneurs from around the world. This is part 2 of this episode. Be sure to check out part 1 if you haven't already. Link in the description.
This episode is brought to you by Founder Catalyst. If you're raising funds and you need to get yourself SCIS and EIS advanced assurance and you need some help with that, then stick around to find out how you can get 5% off of Founder Catalyst's services. Okay, welcome back to part 2. I'm here with Frank. If you haven't checked out part 1, go and check that out. That came out a couple of days ago. Thanks for being here, Frank. I really appreciate it. Let's just jump straight back into it because we were talking about some really interesting stuff, aside from our sleeping patterns in the break. But never mind. Look, we're talking obviously about sales, Forge, sales teams, a whole load of efficiencies in running a company, blah, blah, blah. Like lots of really important stuff. But I really want to get into the meat of what I wanted to talk to you about today, which is kind of AI agents, right? And their role within sales teams. Like, you know, to give you an insight with my own company, when we put together our data room for this round that we've just announced, one thing that I insisted on doing with our financial advisor was showing our financial forecast when it comes to labor costs to show for sales team and a few other roles to show it to flatline. Because I truly believe in the next couple of years, AI agents will play a very significant role there, which will mean, like, to your point, really, I guess your main sales pitch for Salesforce, that at some point they're either going to be augmented or to some degree replaced, maybe, by AI agents. And so I said, let's bake that in. And to my surprise, a couple of these investors that first saw that said, this is the first time I've seen this, right? But it makes sense, right? So I'm curious to know, what is your stance on this? I've had different people on the show have different stances. Yes, there's going to be some people being replaced. It's just going to be augmentation. It might happen in the future. Like, how do you see that relationship as it is now, and where do you think it's kind of going? Especially for salespeople, but also more generally the workforce.
Yeah, I mean, this is all has to do with, let's call it workforce redistribution. So let's look at the car manufacturing, the factories, back in the days. You had a lot of people working in those factories. And then the robots came in, and the factory workers had to find new jobs. And so you're seeing something sort of similar in the world of software, right, today. So yes, you have a lot of people, me and you, clicking on our laptops, doing some stuff. And anything that's repetitive, we all know if something is repetitive, it's prone to automation, etc. And an AI agent is just a means to an end. Everybody wants to automate, right? Ultimately, we live in a capitalist society. We want to make as much revenue as we can and pay the least amount of money in terms of cost base, right? Labor, advertising, you name it, right? So now, if you look at your typical, let's talk about software companies, right? What's the number one cost in the software company? Well, it's labor, right? What do you look at sort of getting, keeping it flat? Like the best case, the VC's the one flat orgs, and revenues to go up nonstop. That's what they want. Reduction, whatever, as long as it keeps flat and the revenue goes up, they're happy. Now, the problem is, in order to scale, you typically need more bodies, right? That is the problem. And so this is where then everybody's trying to figure out, what to do. It's great that, with the ChatGPT moment, people finally have awoken to the concept of large language models, AI. Now, I was saying in the previous episode, the old school AIs, which still works, is machine learning. That's where it came from. Machine learning exists since 1950s. That's how long machine learning has been around. So machine learning, and then this is the new form of AI, right? Inputs, outputs, right? So it's just in a different way. Now it's text. So the first wave that we've seen is the text wave, right? So being able to compute messages, right? We saw that with ChatGPT. The whole world was like, wow, this is crazy. This is so cool, right? So that was the first wave. The second wave that was very visible last year is the voice wave. You're able now to talk to an AI agent over the phone, and it sounds like a human. It's indistinguishable. If you want to check one out, one is called Bordy.ai. It's pretty cool AI agent. I hook it up, on LinkedIn and say, hey, Bordy, give me a call. What does it do? It's free, actually. What does it do? It will call you up, and it will ask me, what's your challenge? And I said, I'm raising a Series A. So we're going to be raising a Series A. So, okay, cool. I have these two people in mind from a network. So it has a network that it's building. So that's really the value of Bordy and why they've been raising so much money, because they're building this sort of network. Let's think of it like LinkedIn, essentially, where Bordy was telling me, hey, Frank, I know these two Series A investors in my network. Would you want to talk to one of them? And I said, who do you have? And I have this guy in New York and this guy in London. I said, okay, I want to speak to the guy in New York. So what Bordy then does is says, hey, Mike, Frank wants to speak to you. Are you okay to connect with him? Right. So that's what it does. Right. That's what the AI agent does. And Bordy keeps on giving me opportunities pretty much once every 2 weeks. And they're interesting opportunities, actually. People that I would not imagine to speak to, right? So it unlocks also these new capabilities. It unlocks you the ability to connect to people around the world that you would not be able to connect to typically, right? So this is where so let's say wave 2. But the typical use case for an AI agent, think of it this way. AI agent. So think of, let's say, inbound motion in a company, right? So let's say you have a lot of leads, a lot of people signing up to your software, your website, etc., and then you're asking for a telephone number, and sometimes you may have a sales rep calling. Why would you have a sales rep calling? You should be calling that prospect sometimes potentially within 2 minutes sort of SLA to back to the prospect. But to achieve that around the clock 24/7, my answer to that is you should be using an AI agent that can do that really well. And it is possible. That's wave 2. And the last wave, which we're going to see this year, a lot more of that, is what's called the video wave. So the first part of the wave, you could see it in Q1 essentially of this year, is already these AI avatars that are being produced in Silicon Valley essentially. This is essentially you're on Instagram, you're on TikTok, and you're looking at the person, you're consuming that video, and you're thinking that person is real on the video. But nothing's real about that video. But you as a human think it's real. So we're going to see also a lot more of that in the world of sales. You're essentially going to see these sales deepfakes. And I think we've seen that a few years ago where I think first time I saw it, I think Barack Obama was, so the former US president, was a deepfake essentially. So he was saying whatever, and it was very clear it was a deepfake, right? But imagine what's going to happen as we're progressing into the new world, right? There will be a lot of more misinformation, a lot more videos which will be not real, and you as a human, you won't be able to distinguish. So, like, as long as you're using it for the good stuff, it's all good, right? So, so that also means we're also going to see, by the way, a lot of more regulation. But where is the world headed, right? Ultimately, as we live in a capitalist society, we want to be achieving superior, revenue levels with the least possible headcount. Ultimately, we want to increase revenue per employee, which is it's a good metric to look at. And I think if you look at the stats in the world, how many employees does it take to generate, let's say, $1 million? It just keeps on decreasing. You need, fewer and fewer employees to reach those revenue levels because of AI, automation, etc. But then, if you're going to ask 100 sales leaders in the world, let's say, whether they ever imagine a sales org without a human, the answer will be no. Everybody will say no. So if you're being honest to yourself that you can't fully replace a particular function in an organization like sales, etc., because intrinsically people still want to buy from other people, right? So you still need the face to let's go to the machine. This is what I was doing at Google essentially. Google is like a machine, but Google still hires a gazillions of people because the machine that they've built internally still needs faces. So, unfortunately, the way that things work is the human, the advertiser, for example, right? The advertiser, let's say Coca-Cola, wants to buy ads from Google, and the advertiser wants to speak to a human. The advertiser does not want to speak to the machine, which is why you needed a face to the machine. Like the same similar here concept. Like, yes, we are seeing introduction of AI agents, AI SDRs. And there's so many of them. It's already like thousands of them. It's already so crowded as a market in the last 2 years. But my take is the reason why it's flourishing. Why it's flourishing so much is because there's a huge pressure from a labor standpoint. So salaries are rising, for example, right? You have to pay sales reps commission. They're not cheap, especially if they're good, they're not cheap. But I think there's no problem paying, good reps a lot of money. I think there's no problem because the unit economics makes sense, etc. But what there is a problem, I think, is mentioning this in the previous episode we had, which was the fact that you have quite a significant percentage, more than 50% of individuals in the sales team typically are not accretive, meaning they're not profitable, right? And you can't do, as a sales leader, you can't do much about it because you have a sales target, you have a quota that you need to hit, and you'll hire anybody you can sometimes to hit that number, because if you're not going to hit that number, something will happen, so you may get fired, etc. Right? So you're under pressure as a sales leader. And the problem in the labor market, because of a lot of competition, etc., you're fighting that we are in talent war all the time. We're fighting for the best talent. And guess what? It's not that you're going to have 10 out of 10 A players in your team. So you're always going to, you're lucky to be having 1 or 2, in your team. The rest is going to be B's and C's. But arguably, you're going to have also a lot of dead wood that you need to get rid of. But you can't because you have the target's head. Now, this is the answer to the problem is an AI agent or other forms of automation. Essentially, how do we reduce that segment of employees that nobody really cares about? And these employees arguably should not be doing, say, sales. They should be doing something else, right? Because ultimately, if you're really bad at sales, you should do stuff that you're really good at, right? Just, kind of common sense, right? So this will get rid of the deadwood, is my opinion. So AI agents, automation, etc., and it will increase the output levels of the people that are really good at sales, right? And then, yes, the answer, in my opinion, is augmentation. Now, let's have a look at sort of practically what happens right now in the market. So in the last 2 years, you've got these companies popping up that just built AI agents, right? And the software itself, right? It's all about AI agents. But then there's, as I mentioned also in the previous episode, there's a lot of software that's just built for humans, right? And they have no AI agents. They barely have AI in it. Why wouldn't they not introduce AI agents, or why would they not build a bunch of AI agents and LLMs and machine learning, like all of it, right, to increase efficiencies? Well, I did mention also the fact that they charge per seat. So if you're going to massively start increasing conversion rates and reducing labor in the organizations, and you're charging per seat, well, you're hurting yourself, which is one of the reasons why Salesforce was born as a company, because these companies, when I told them what I want to happen to improve my efficiencies, they did not deliver. And as a result, Salesforce was born. So all I can say, listen to Frank, if you're one of my vendors, please listen to me, because I may get, frustrated. I may build a business which will go up against your business, because ultimately, I was also mentioning, I'm the efficiency guy, right? And I could not increase my conversion rates. When I was speaking to my CFO at the beginning of the year, there's nothing that would look in the funnel we could significantly increase from a conversion rate standpoint, which is why we were forced to hire more people to get to our targets that we had to get to. Right? So it's a frustration that you have. And of course, as I said, sales leaders will always say we need humans, but sales leaders, a lot of them are also, apart from being forced to hit targets today, a lot of them are forced to hit targets with good efficiencies in place.
Hi, a friendly reminder to share this episode with your network, like, and subscribe. And if you are feeling really supportive, please consider reviewing the show on the podcast platform of your choice. It all really helps support what we do. Thank you. Now back to the show.
Right, they're looking at what's called CAC. They're looking at CAC payback period, right? Essentially, they're looking at all these metrics. They need efficient growth, and there's all the tools in the market now. There's a bunch of AI agents in the market. There's no excuse anymore, unfortunately, not to be more efficient, right? So
I also think there's a certain amount of ignorance and ego at play when you speak to a lot of sales leaders when they answer that question too, which is, I think is very naive, very, very naive to assume that, AI is that your job isn't replaceable, right? Everyone is, to a degree, at some point, given enough time, given enough technology. But also, I think ego is at play a bit too. I think even I was guilty of this when I was a sales leader. That you sort of tie the value or how good you are at your job based on the size of your team, right? How many people that you manage, like that kind of thing. There's kind of a thing at play there, and so to think for some sales leaders to think about the possibility of having much smaller teams is terrifying. It's like, oh well, then I'm no longer as senior, I'm no longer as as cool or whatever it might be. There's a lot of play here. Human beings are messy creatures. We tie up this thing. But I'm curious to ask you another question about this, which is really important for me, because again, complete transparency. There's a very selfish reason for asking this as it relates to my startup. But how are these AI agents and these models being trained? What is the information they're getting? Because again, to a point like we just ended on in part one, there is a lot of conflicting information out there. And if AI is learning from the internet, which it does for the most part, or even if you're training it, internally, what is right and wrong? What is the best, like your question that your intern asked you, what is the best sales opening, cold call opener? Like, an AI is going to be given a lot of shit information, because there is a lot of terrible, terrible information out there about sales. And as we know, if good information was prevalent, then everyone would be an A player. And as we also talked about, A players seem to have an intrinsic sort of personality, right, as well. So wouldn't we also need personality in AI to really make them A players? Like, where's that data coming from, and how can we make that data better?
Good question. So let's start with let's call it the personality. So yes, we have one agent right now. The name of the agent is Agent Frank, named after me. Makes sense. There's a story, etc. Right? And there's a lot of AI agents in the world that just have random names. Just generally on this question,
it also sounds like a secret agent, like 007 kind of equivalent, Agent Frank.
Yes. From just generally where the agents as let's call the industry, where's it all going? So right now, companies have this sort of one agent, but really we're right now going to this new phase of what we call swarm of agents. Essentially, agents talking to each other and working with each other as a team. That's really what will be the next wave. It's going to get bigger, better, whatever. Now, that means in our world, we have this one agent called Agent Frank, but guess what? There will be Agent Sally, Agent Lucy, whatever. There'll be a different agents that will operate intrinsically different. They'll be just whether they're going to use different playbooks, etc. We haven't figured this out, but they will be different, right? Because intrinsically different characters. It's like assembling an SDR team, right? This guy's different to this guy, and then so on and so forth, right? That's how we think also about agents. Intrinsically, they're different. But I'm going to talk about data in a bit. But ultimately, like going back to the apprentice, what that was sort of telling me, hey Frank, what's the best opener? Well, I don't know. You don't know. I'm sure you can watch a bunch of videos and whatever, figure it out. How do we figure out whether something works better than another thing? You test it, right? So how do you test? You could, let's say you have to do $100,000 a day. Well, if you speak to, let's say, 10 individuals and you have this line, opener, test it, whether it works for you, whether it works for them, etc. Then you do another test and so on and so forth. But the human is not so systematic about it, like you have to okay, I'm going to test this now and I'm going to test that now and my sample size is big enough, etc. This is where the AI agents come in. So let's say I have a market of 10,000 potential prospects that I should be going after. Well, when you want to figure out what works, what doesn't, you should be by default programmatically sort of testing is my answer. And the human is not the one that should be setting up the test, by the way, as well. This is where another AI agent comes in and sets up the tests to try and figure out what works and what doesn't. And then we would do computations against this every variant. So essentially, we're testing a particular component only, right? So to understand what moves the needle, what doesn't, right? So that after running, let's call it an agentic workflow for, let's say, X period of time, we then have some data that says that this approach works better than these. It's all about eliminating the garbage, and you start reducing stuff that doesn't work and testing more of the stuff that seems like it works. There's some signaling, essentially, right? Better reply rates, better everything, more pipeline, etc. And you start up, you keep on testing. And I think
trial and error, yeah.
And I think you see a lot of that in the world of marketing and advertising. Those guys in the world of ad agencies are always testing, ad copies, creative, etc. Salespeople, they don't test enough. And then, of course, things change, you have to be also sometimes communicating with what's happening, in the now in the world, politics or whatever, right? Sometimes, you have to do that. You kind of have to drop in what's trending right now in Q1 or Q4, whatever, and you drop that into the email. So it's things like that need to be tested. So that's how I think about how do you get better, right? And you need to reward and punish. You need a reward and punishment mechanism, essentially, right? So you reward for something that works really well, and you want to do more of that, and something that never works, you get rid of that as soon as you can, right? As long as it's sort of what's called statistically significant. A lot of people tell me, when they run any form of testing, Frank, I've just tested this variant versus that variant, and I'm asking, okay, how many prospects did you kind of sift through and see if it's worth it? Oh, I had only 10 prospects in this variant, and then 10 prospects in this variant. It's like, do you know that
That's not a test?
It's not a test. It's not statistically significant, but people feel good about doing a test. Like, wow, this is great. But if you speak to a typical statistician out there, he'll laugh at you because it's like tossing a coin. Unfortunately, that's not how it works. You have to read about, how big should be the how big should be a test, because otherwise there's no point. Because it's like also on our website, somebody tells me, and I'm not going to say who it is, but anyway, somebody still saying, Frank, what if we do an A/B test on our website? And I said, do we have enough traffic to run even a test? If we don't, let's just go with a hunch, because even setting up an A/B test is just a waste of the resources. It's just not how it works, guys, please. So you should be only running tests when you feel like you have a lot of traffic and you're optimizing, right? So, but within the agentic world, guess what? The agents will figure out how big it should be, the test size and all that, right? So, okay, now let's go into what goes into, let's call it computation, the relevance, where does the data come from, etc. So my big belief was always, and this is how we have built the world, and everybody can build the AI agents as they please. But in sales, generally speaking, there's a seller and there's a buyer, right? Potential buyer, right? And this is how we look at the world of sales. There's one party that wants to reach out to the other party, and we assume that other party potentially has a pain that we can solve, and we have a potentially a product, but there may be a fit to solve that pain, right? And that's it. And that's how we look at the world. That's all. So that means we need a ton of data on the seller side, and we need a ton of data on the buyer side, right? To do what's called matchmaking. Let's go that way, That's probably the best way to explain it. And really, the business that we're in, actually, we are going into a data business more and more as we progress. And we need a ton of data on both sides of the coin to become like Google. We have so much data, and you're super defensible, So On the seller side, we need to know, and this is what we ask within the product itself. You're going to log into Salesforce, and there's a section called the Forge, and in the Forge, we're asking all information about your company, all your value props. What's the pain that you solve? What's your solution? What's the cost of inaction? You can upload your sales playbook, your FAQs, everything. So that's a digital brain essentially. So we have a lot of good understanding. Then you hook up your HubSpot or your Salesforce into Salesforce as well, and guess what? We can also take that data. And essentially, why is an AI agent, let's say, more powerful than a human at any given moment argument? Because an AI agent can crunch 1 billion data rows in seconds that a human won't be able to do. Just think of just that, and the power it can give you. Essentially, it's about increasing the likelihood of target attainment for companies. The way that you increase that, just like Google does that or Facebook does that, they have a ton of data that they're able to crunch of their advertisers, for example, to improve results, etc. Now, a single human in sales cannot do that because a single human doesn't think about billion data rows. They may think about one or two things to try and make a decision to help this business do a sales. But what intrinsically why this AI agent is also a thing is because what ultimately I'm trying to help eliminate, and which is I was seeing in my sales team, is we're trying to eliminate what's called the human error that happens in the world of sales. How do you get rid of the error? Because that error that happens in sales is costing you a lot of money. You don't think about human error. In all parts of the organization, I always think about, wow, how much human error I have in my company, in sales, in marketing, etc. And I'm trying to kill that human error. And guess what? The AI agents, all that is a fantastic way to try and kill the human error, so that when a human does operate, it has the least the least possible error rate. Essentially, let's go that way. So that's on the seller side. Now we need to know everything about the potential buyer, and in simple forms, they're just scraping the web. That's all it is, right? So, but sometimes it's not about also scraping. Sometimes you may have some information about your prospect in your CRM, and it's also pulling the data. But so what? It's about building a profile, understanding your that particular individual in the company really well, right? And what does a typical sales rep do? Well, he goes, checks out the LinkedIn profile, he'll Google a bit, he'll go on the website, etc., right? And all that behavior can be systemized, can be pulled, scraped, whatever, everything is accessible on the intranet, right? About individuals. And you just go and check out the website. You take everything from the site. You go and check out on LinkedIn profile. Take everything: the headline, the about section, current position, which KPIs maybe that they're optimizing towards. And then you get rid of the stuff that doesn't make any difference. For example, where did they study? Why would that make any difference to compute, right? So, for example, that's what needs to be ignored. We ignore that information. Which unit do you go to? It doesn't make any difference. So you have two data sets, right, in a system, right? And then you try and figure out how to, stitch them together, essentially, and then compute on top of that, right? That's probably the best way to explain that. And then you also need naturally to give a system a goal, right? I always say every machine needs a goal, and the AI agent needs a goal. The goal is to book a meeting, right? Let's talk about the simplest. There's other goals. It could be like, a click out event, etc. for the agent. But the goal is to book a meeting. So now, this is what we know about this potential buyer, this person, and this is our value prop. Now, you could also have multiple different value props. So an agent, for example, could select the best possible value prop, because sometimes companies sell multiple products, or they sell one product, but they talk about the same product in 10 different ways, depending on the buyer persona. A human struggles with that. With the systematic, that thing. And this is, again, another example of why AI agent will be more systematic, will be better, etc. Now, you stitch these two data sets together, you give it the output, and you say, in which language do you want it? Do you want to do it in English? Do you want to do it in French, etc.? I would say, never send an email in English to a Frenchman. It will backfire. Guess what happens when you send an email? A very well-crafted email in French to a Frenchman, a lot of replies. The only thing that they annoy, because I don't speak French, I had to tell the person, I'm really sorry, but I don't speak French. Would you be okay to have the demo in English? And they said no, or they ghosted me. Across the whole funnel, unfortunately, it needs to happen in that native manner. What I'm trying to say is that you can craft the best emails, etc., but localization is also a big aspect that a lot of people forget about. And that's, again, something that the AI just can help you solve. But because in this at least line of business, like sales, the human expects to speak to another human. You still need that human at the bottom of the funnel or middle of the funnel to take over and continue and towards the close, right? So,
right. And this is where I have to jump in, because this is exactly my thoughts, right? And this is where I think the world is getting a bit carried away, and why I'm asking these questions, because it absolutely makes sense that for something like sales outreach, for whether it's cold calling, AI SDR work in general, that you've got a lot of that you've just described is automatable, right? For want of a better word. There's a lot of stuff there that is just bulk tasking, research, very simply asking, slightly customized outreach, whether it's invoice, that's absolutely on the rise. Like we're seeing cold calling increasing, which I think needs to happen because people are sick of being cold emailed, and that will be a battle constantly. But anyway, that's another discussion. That's fine. We can take care of that. Where I think people are struggling to believe that AI can start taking over is the steps that follow that. So actually the selling part, the demoing, the account management, the business development, where, for example, you use that data point about the university. Now, I think you and I would both know if we were looking up a prospect that we were about to call and we saw, oh, they went to Harvard, I went to Harvard. Raising investment is painful enough without getting bogged down in legal costs. That's why I'm using Founder Catalyst, today's sponsor for Peer, my startup's pre-seed raise. We've been lucky enough to have Sam, the CEO of Founder Catalyst, on the show before. Go and check out that episode. Their funding round service offers the most cost-effective way to produce funding round legals in the UK. It's just £1,495 excluding VAT, with no monthly fees or hidden extras, no matter how much you're raising. One Founder Catalyst customer recently raised 2.7 million and saved around £10,000 compared to the next option. If you're looking for SEIS, EIS Advanced Assurance, they've got a 100% success rate over the last 3 years. Founder Catalyst is built by founders for founders, and from my own experience, I can't recommend them enough. You can scan the QR code on the screen around here somewhere or around there somewhere, I don't know, or use the link in the description for 5% off. Thank you to Founder Catalyst for sponsoring this episode. Now back to it. We would use that, right? Not because we want to be sinister or manipulate, but because we're like, that's pretty cool. Like, because genuinely, as part of our personality, we'd be like, hey man, like, my name's Greg, I'm calling from so-and-so. Listen, I'll be honest, I was looking through your LinkedIn profile before the call, and I noticed you went to Harvard, and I noticed you went like the year before me. Like, I went to Harvard too. Like, that's great. You know what I mean? And we build rapport. AI will not do that for the reasons you just pointed out. So there's a lack of nuance there that now I believe it is possible to give AI this nuance, which is what my startup is trying to do. But it does mean that I think that we're in a dangerous territory of making promises to some degree of where this technology is headed, that in reality, it's either not possible entirely, or it's going to take a very different approach to the one we're using right now. Because I don't think the same approach that we're taking to AI SDR agents, for example, is going to work for solving that problem. That's a bigger challenge. And it requires a completely different set of data, which fundamentally that data, I think, needs to be built in a completely different way. Like we're talking about personality, reasoning, nuance, intuition. Like this is something else, and it's going to have to be multimodal. It's going to have to be multi-layered, and it's going to have to be very unique. And my biggest worry is that because we are generating more and more data from AI. So for example, again, to go back to that university example, that's a great example, because if your AI agent will have picked that up. And then, so when that information is passed on to a person to call, that's omitted, that's gone. So now we have a problem where potentially human beings are being fed homogenized data. And that's just from a human point of view. So now we're maybe even pulling the personality out of the human now. And then if we start to train models to take over the human in that part of the process, you can see we give it, potentially shit in, shit out. Right. So we end up with this. And that's what concerns me about this. I think something can be done about it. Like I said, that's why my startup exists. But I don't know. Do you broadly agree with that? Have I missed something?
No, I broadly agree with that. And, as you said, there are always nuances in the way that AI agents, or just generally the way things have to be done, either via call or via email. It has to be done differently. Yes, there's different expectations, etc., different outputs. Yes, all that. Plus, naturally, also we haven't seen also a lot of regulations sort of, let's call, catching up to the world of AI. And I think once we're going to see a lot more examples where, let's call, the bad actors are let's call, misusing AI agents, etc., we're also going to see a lot more regulation as we go into the future. Which is why I just want to sort of warn anybody out there, like, don't bet just on AI agents to kind of run your company, because somebody will decide, damn, let's get rid of those AI agents because they're taking jobs, whatever. Some president may decide.
Or someone hacks them, right? Like
Yeah,
there's
whatever,
also a security side of it, and compliance. Yeah,
like it's things like that. This is why my answer is you always blend. You de-risk your sales org or sales function or just your business by always blending, right? Just in case, one or the other thing, one part, the human or the AI agent doesn't work out. You still have, the human also may not work out. For example, let's say somebody says tomorrow, Frank, I'm leaving. That's in my last day is on Monday. And it's like, okay, cool. And then, the AI agent will do maybe the work for a bit. That's an example on the human side, right? Where I always say, always blend.
It's a risk with every technological innovation. Like to go back to the example you gave before about factories, having certain parts of the system being replaced by machines. The risk there is a real one. A machine breaks down or whatever. Does anyone know how to do this thing the machine was doing? No human being has done this task for 20 years. We have no one in this entire building that knows how to do that one thing. It's like, shit. What have we done?
Yeah, but I think also, the interesting thought that's being shared in the industry right now is we're moving right now towards a way where AI agents will talk to AI agents. As we do this a lot more, because a lot of people say, Frank, isn't this just a lot more spam that people just get? Wouldn't people be more overwhelmed with the communication? So essentially, from bad emails to good emails, doesn't matter. From better communication, for people, it's still the spam. And I think the problem just generally that exists, that's being solved. So which is why I'm generating data on both sides of the coin, is ultimately you need to solve what's called the communication problem between the two businesses. And business A tries to do business with business B. Business B gets too many emails, too many irrelevant emails, essentially. There are problems, essentially, between two entities communicating with each other because humans are inefficient to communicate with each other. So then the seller side tries to build what's called the AI agent, and Frank helps them to do that. But on the buyer side, you also need an AI agent to process the emails, essentially.
And you're seeing that.
Right? So when we're seeing that, the market is waking up, there's some solutions popping up, etc. Yeah. But where are we headed, I think, as a society, generally? Is ultimately an AI agent will contact another AI agent. They will have a conversation back and forth, in real time and much faster than two humans booking a meeting, whatever, They'll literally hash it out in a few minutes, most likely, back and forth. And then there will be an outcome. And the outcome is this is a solution that potentially could solve this problem in the organization. And then the human should look at this.
Yeah, I agree. I said the exact same thing. I posed it to Gorish from Sybil. We had a really interesting conversation about it, and I proposed this exact thing. I see the same sort of future where you're going to have the majority of selling happening between selling agents and buying agents, and this will happen behind the scenes, and then maybe the human will be put into the loop when the AI agent says, I've talked to every single selling agent for every single platform for the solution we're looking for. I've whittled it down to 2. I've booked those meetings. They're in your diary. Yeah, that's what it will be. And I guess the next logical phase is then I've put them in the diary for your AI clone. and he's going to negotiate and get the best price. You know what I mean? Like that's going to be the next thing. But for now, that definitely seems to be the direction.
It's like this website, g2.com, right? The software reviews. And I'm thinking, there's so much software that the human has to review. Why won't the AI agent review every software? Now, it assumes that there's AI agents on both sides of the equation, right? They can have a chat back and forth. And then based on the requirement in the business, here are the 3 best options in the market out of 1,000, as an example, and then the human only looks at these 3 options because the human is overwhelmed. The human cannot process, again, 1,000 solutions in the market. Let's look at that sort of examples. Well, ultimately, we are going into this whole world of where you have a necessity to have an agent on the seller side, and you do have also a necessity to have an agent on the buyer side to make essentially the communication between two businesses a lot more efficient. Well, the goal again is to get rid of the garbage in the, let's call it, email ecosystem. Because ultimately what will happen is if suddenly the efficiencies are very great, all the garbage will just get destroyed very fast, and then essentially humans' mailbox will be much healthier, right? It's about figuring out how to get rid of the garbage, essentially, right? So,
it's just really interesting because I'm not sure how I feel about entirely removing every inefficiency because like to go back to that university point, it's like yes, that's an inefficient data point, but there's something very human about mistakes
or picking up on things that are unusual, right? That's a very human characteristic. And I think that's exactly why at this stage, if we were to give two companies the opportunity to buy an AI SDR and an AI buyer, right, and say, right, there you go, you've got this opportunity, they would still always say, fine, but I want the meetings to be booked for me, because there is a human intuition that we know we are the ones that are going to form that relationship, because if there is something inherently messy about the human condition that, I don't know, it could be for that exact reason that, like, I want to speak to the guy who's trying to sell it to me because I just want to hear what they sound like. I want to know how I'm going to be looked after. It's going to give me an indication of the level of support that they provide. Or, do you know what I mean? It's more than just the cold hard facts. Like, do they solve my problem? Because actually, it may be that you know, I've bought things but in the past from companies that have been not entirely the solution that I'm looking for. Maybe it doesn't solve all of my problems, but they solve the ones that they do solve really well, maybe compared to competitors, or because of the size of the company, or they're able to offer a level of support. There's a personality, like there's a culture at that company that I gel with more. That's the nuance I'm talking about that I think is missed. And my concern, and I think a lot of people's concerns, is that with our obsession over efficiency, what we're doing without realizing is we're cutting out some of that nuance. And ultimately, this is going to be the data set we feed to the next generation of AI. So do we really want that? And what are we doing maybe to preserve that so that we don't end up losing that? Do you know what I mean? Like I think that's what's on top of my mind and what's on top of others. Like there's something about not following the rules, which is very human, but also, I mean, that's what innovation is, right? So, you know, if you had like you know, your previous sales role, the first sales role you had, you got it because you were excelling at what you were doing, and in some ways that was you going outside of the boundaries of what the job role was. If you were AI, you would only ever be able to stay within your lane. There would be no room for innovation. Do you see what I mean? Like,
Yes.
So how can we put that magic into AI? That's what I'm interested in figuring out how we can do as a man, because I think it's possible.
Let's see, I guess. I'm the guy. Show me the magic. Or somebody gives me a pitch, and I'm like, I'm trying to find anything that's you know, whereas like this is definitely not possible. But if everything sounds all right, just show it to me. Let's run a test. You know, I'm the type of guy that I'm very open. You know, because I'm always in this mindset of trying to improve my business and the happiness of employees and a bunch of other things, right? So I was like, sure, you know, kind of makes sense. Let's do it, you know. Thinking back and forth is like I'm trying to be the guy that makes decisions very fast, like super fast. Like I gotta typically say, you know, somebody making me a proposal and it's gonna say, nope, that's not for us. Like I'm gonna be very fast on that because there's three outcomes, but you need to be very good in your head. It's like definitely not, maybe I need to consult, or let's go, let's try this out. And I have typically these three answers, you know, to anybody that I speak to. And maybes are very little. It's very little. Like as long as you're like a yes or no, like super fast, like anything that you hear, like that, a bit like a, you know, AI agent. Then yeah, you kind of. Well,
yeah, I mean, it makes sense. Like we said, CEOs are very busy people, and running a business requires you to be efficient with the decision making process. Absolutely, but I guess my point is just that I think we need to be careful about what we believe we need to do, which is correct, in order to run a company. How that could affect, you know, that approach could filter down through the technology into the next generation of technology. I suppose that's kind of the point I'm driving at. But we could talk about this for hours, but let's not, because there's one more thing I wanted to cover with you before I let you go, because we've only got 10 minutes left, which was well, maybe 2 if we've got time. But the recent 11x discussion that's been going on, right?
If you are enjoying this episode and want to support the show, please like, subscribe with notifications turned on, and let us know your thoughts and opinions in the comments below. This lets YouTube know we are doing something right. Back to the show.
Like, you must have seen the news about this. This is within your space, right? What's your takeaway from all this?
So I think there's sort of, let's call it a lot of, so if you're talking just about, you know, 11x or the whole space in general, that whole space exists for about like a year or so.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's very new.
The whole tech is in its infancy, right? It's an interesting tech, a lot of hype, And yes, at the there at the top you've got 11x and a few other companies, right? So, but 11x was I think the first company, came out of the UK, now in the Bay Area, right? And they're doing very well. I think they scaled to like a $10 million ARR and more probably, depending on how you count, right? But yeah, there was an article where this is not a typical business, and there may be something shady, etc. So one of the things that I always kind of caution people is when you read something, let's say on the internet, what's the intent of that, right? And some things do feel like sometimes fabricated to me, and as I start questioning. So that whole story around a company in the space feels like I'm not really sure. Like, it feels like somebody paid for like really, like you're like. Nah, it's like, and because there's a lot of kind of things that are being said about a particular company. None of them, like most of, like, there's not like really hard, how should I say? Because I'm a founder myself, right? And I know what VCs think, etc. It's like it feels like a PR article, just somebody paid to do that. Like that's the first thing that comes to mind.
It feels like a hit piece to you.
Yeah. And now, okay, so there may be some complaints about blah blah blah. They're not working, churn rates, blah blah blah. But again, you have to remember that this whole tech exists for like a year. And yes, they're trying to be at the forefront. And yes, things will break. And yes, a lot of them will break very frequently. But ultimately, it's like, to be successful and to grow, you need to fail multiple times, maybe most of the time, to get to greatness, essentially, and go and rock and roll. So, and that is normal, because if you're not looking to fail, if you're like, trying to perfection everything, like the thing is, it's not just the AI agent that has to work. There's other components in the equation that have to work, and kind of piece it together and kind of trying to make it happen. It's very, very difficult, just generally, because we're building the agent. We know how difficult it is, and sure, there is a churn rate. Why there is a churn rate? Well, we're in a different segment to generally to 11x, but why there is a churn? Well, sometimes we have a startup that comes to us and they don't even have a product market fit, and they want to test an AI agent because they don't want to hire humans from the get-go, but you don't have a PMF. And for now, we've been always like, okay, sure, you can try it out, but then it doesn't work out. And then we also have churn, as an example, right? Then there's another example where you have very established companies and they have, millions of dollars in revenue. And they're like, Frank, so yeah, we have these humans, we have these people in sales, but really things are not working. We want to try an AI agent and see if it works. And then there's a thing in my head that I'm like, product channel fit. Like, do I think you have a channel fit or not? It's because think of it this way, like you're spending money in Google ads, right? You're going to spend like, a few $1,000s. A lot more expensive than, by the way, agent typically. You're going to spend a lot of money in Google ads. You're going to try and make sure you're converting. And yes, you need to optimize the bids, the ad copy. It's this very similar process, by the way. In my head, it's all about acquisition. I need to acquire customers. You can acquire them in different ways. And sometimes Google ads doesn't work. And guess what? I used to work at Google. We had a lot of churn. A lot of churn. But the thing with Google is Google's monopoly. So these customers will keep coming back, keep burning cash, etc. With the AI SDR sort of space, they can go to other vendors or kind of test it out, right? So that's kind of the difference. So there has to be also product channel fit. So the typical question that I asked to my prospect, I had a post about this actually, like, did you ever run any form of cold email? Did you try to acquire customers through cold email, like systematically, through a human automation, etc.? And if the answer is yes, then what were the results? Oh, we failed. Now, what makes you believe that the SDR could do a better job? Yeah, it is a conversation you should be having up front, etc. Yes, and you try and make it happen, etc. We're not in the business where we want to churn customers. No, I think nobody wants to churn customers generally. Right? Well, why would you do that? Like, generally, you have good intentions in mind. You want to make sure that your sales people don't oversell. And the same thing actually we can see with sales.
I understand what you're saying. There is a bit of a misunderstanding, I think, with AI agents that they are going to somehow be better than what they already have, where it's like, no. It's to scale what you already have. So if you've got something that's working fairly well, it can scale that to work even better.
It can work better, right, cheaper, faster. Yeah, so
but it's got to be working already to some degree.
Yeah, otherwise, something like this, and then it just you want to do it. You want to go up.
Because like you said, AI is going to just follow those instructions. So if those instructions are shit, you're not going to get any results.
Yes. Yeah. So everybody has churn. We have churn. They have churn. First year was very bumpy for everybody. Us as well. It happens. It's okay. We don't cry about it. If something happens to our competition, we don't say, "Oh, you bad, we're good." You don't do that. Be nice.
But why do you think 11x is such a target? Because I'll be honest, I've never seen people pile on to something as quick as I have with 11x,
because they raise so much money, so a lot of attention, and you need to pick at somebody in the space. You always pick the big guys. It's like picking, the number
But it
one.
seems like even people who aren't involved in this space are picking on it. Do you think it's because of the overall sort of perception of AI SDR as a whole?
Well, because a lot of people are like, oh, these AI agents are replacing jobs.
They want to pick
Let's
holes in it.
11x.
Right.
Yeah, let's pick an 11x. Oh, it doesn't work. Yeah, humans.
Told you it wouldn't work.
Yeah, we told you. Because there's a lot of these people. You pick at a company like 11x or whatever other company, but you always pick at the big guys. They're the big guys. We're the small guys right now, and nobody picks at us. Nobody says, "Oh, Frank, Agent Frank doesn't work." But
not yet. That's the dream, right?
But I always say, any PR is good PR. It's like Ryanair, right? So good PR, bad PR. It's all advertising at the end of the day, right? So I think they got a bunch of customers from that, in my opinion.
Maybe.
It's all free advertising, in my take. But yes, because ultimately, this space is quite a niche of a space. Don't share it with your competitors. Very important. My advice to everybody: do not share it with your competitors. Yes, they didn't have a good day, maybe. But be nice, essentially, is what I want to say, with everybody in the category, right? Always be nice. And yes, you compete, but be nice. Everybody has a bad day. And because ultimately, if somebody says that 11x doesn't work, some people may perceive the fact that Agent Frank doesn't work as well. To say, you have to even support your competitors in the early days. You can't say
we're all in it together.
Yeah, even though we compete together, but you have to compete nicely. And what does that mean? We talk to each other. We all talk to each other. I think it's just salespeople talking to each other. So you all have to talk to each other. Yes, you compete, but at the same time, don't go at each other. We have to support each other. Yes, there are some issues with the agent because it's in infancy. But trust me, we all are figuring things out, and they're working. We see successful customers. We see deficiencies. And it's just a technology thing sometimes. You're just waiting for GPT-5 or because one thing is like having the right LLMs. The second thing is the orchestration, like using it in the right way. That's also that needs to happen. You need to figure out things. You need to launch with customers. There'll be customers for whom it will work, and there'll be customers for whom it will not work. So you need to then to create what's an ICP for the AI agent and what's an anti-ICP. This is definitely not something. Right, because a lot of people will then a lot of anti-ICPs. I mean, you're not fit for this. Use the product, and of course they churn. You're not meant to be, but you do with an AI.
But that's part of the process. That's just part of the process. Yeah.
But there will be a lot of bad reviews about everybody. This thing does not work, and it's just part of the business. You're trying to figure out what's a customer for this, what's not a customer for this.
Yeah,
and
even removing all of that, like just the nature of running a business, it's hard. People make mistakes. Like it doesn't matter even if you're on the cutting edge of something like this, which is, like you said, very new and with all of the levels of complexity that comes with that in trying to break new ground. Even if you were working in something that's been established for the last 10, 20 years, it's still really difficult to run a business, and you will fuck up. Like that's just the way it goes. Yeah. Like it's just how quickly do you get back up and continue on, or how are you prepared to put your hands up and say, I'm sorry, we screwed up. But yeah, and you're right. Like I've seen some great posts from Gorish, from Yuri, from AISDR and the others within the space, making some pretty nuanced takes on that situation compared to others where I've just seen it just completely just throwing in, weighing in. It's like, okay, I think, yes, there's a sense of self-preservation because it's your industry, but also I think there's just a maturity and a certain amount of respect. We know how difficult this is, guys. Don't be too quick to judge.
Yeah, but there's a lot of people though that don't know how difficult it is. There's also a lot of people that don't know what they're talking about.
Yeah. That's the majority of people
the majority.
In general.
They don't know
everything.
You don't even know what you're talking. You have never built an AI agent, and then you talk about the AI.
But that's also just a problem generally. Everyone is an expert on everything these days, right?
It seems like everybody's an expert on AI agents these days, and
everything, and politics, and religion, and science.
I'm not an expert, but I've dabbled within more than most, like 99%. So.
It's like during the pandemic, everyone was an expert on biology.
It's like, I'm not an AI engineer.
Yeah.
I'm a sales guy, and I'm trying to dump my brain into an AI agent so it does what I do faster, better, whatever. That's really what I'm trying to achieve. I hired an AI engineer, and many of them, and I have a 30 people engineering and product team that just their job, I'm bringing down the next, is to make it work. And it's difficult. And we go at each other, sort of like cat and dog every week because it can work, but it is very, very painful because for us, AI agent is at the top. At the bottom, we have our other forges, 5 products that powers Agent Frank. These 5 products, they have to work really well so that the agent that sits at the top, that consumes all the 5 products, works. Like it's like this experiment sort of, So if one product fails for some reason and it's not working, that impacts Agent Frank as an example.
Right. The domino effect.
The good thing is that everything's fixable now. Nearly everything's fixable. That gives me hope that this is a thing. This is a thing. It's just that it takes time. And sure, I wish I could do it in a day or week, etc. I bet 11x wishes to do the same, and everything just works, But it just takes time. And how long is it going to take? Well, trust me. I think this year is going to be a very interesting year. And then in 2026, everybody will say, wow, I was wrong about AIs. I was wrong about. You're going to have a lot of those people saying, I believe in AI agents. The wave will change.
Oh, yeah.
This year is like, nah, I told you so. The humans going to rule the world. They're always going to be in sales. Trust me, I speak to a lot of founders myself, on a daily basis. And a lot of founders generally are in this sort of world they're living, like they had enough managing humans. They rather speak to AI agents on a daily basis. There's also that psychological thing. I'm actually that person myself. I rather work with AI agents than with humans. I personally, because I tell the agent what needs to be done. I'll give my input, and the agent will go and do it.
Well, I've got some news for you. I'm actually AI in this entire. You'll be glad to hear.
Because you have to deal with the psychology, with the complaints, and there's a lot of business founders.
Managing people is hard. I mean, the majority of running a business is managing people. It's very, very difficult.
Just hiring, managing people, complaints, this doesn't work, that doesn't work. And I just wish everything would be more like an AI agent, I just tell it to do it, and that's it,
Yeah. Well, I mean, look, there was another question I was going to ask on the back of that, but we've run out of time, which was going to be, but what about our responsibility to the economy? But we haven't got time. We'll have to do it in another conversation because that's an interesting point. But man, it's been really interesting, this conversation. I've really enjoyed talking to you, but I will let you go. We will have to catch up again soon, though, because we've clearly got a lot to talk about. But listen, man, I'm going to put your LinkedIn. I'm going to obviously put the website and everything like that in the description of the episode, so people check you out. They can check the business out, everything like that. To go and look at SalesForge and what you're all about. Is there anything else you want to shout out or for me to include in the episode description?
No. I mean, you could just find me on LinkedIn, the guy with the bacon emoji. If somebody doesn't know what bacon stands for, go and ChatGPT it.
Yeah. Awesome, dude. Well, look, thank you again so much. Have a wonderful, weekend now. I mean, by the time this comes out, it'll be a Monday, but or a Wednesday. I can't remember. But for us, it's the weekend. So enjoy your weekend, although I'm sure you're probably going to be working, knowing you.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Cool, man. Take care. Speak to you soon. Thank you for listening and or watching. Please like and subscribe. Or if you are listening via podcasting service and want to show your support, consider rating or leaving a review. It really helps. See you next week.